Hello and welcome to Warcraft Daily for today, the 28th of September 2013. So in today's news we have some interesting analysis of drop rates by mmo-champion, some talk about world first progression, a little bit of me just talking about how catering to everyone may actually just kind of like dilute the game, and finally a roundup of the interesting tweets mainly from Ghostcrawler. So for drop rates, now I saw this really interesting post on mmo-champion when I was going around the place looking for things to talk about in today's show. And they basically did like an analysis from their various tools in WoWDB of the drop rates from the Siege of Orgrimmar and just 5.4 stuff in general. So I thought that was pretty cool, and this is in Flex and in LFR. So on Raid Finder, the item drop rate's actually 25%, and the failbag one is 75%. Now what I thought was interesting is that when you compare this to Throne of Thunder, it was 16% in Throne of Thunder for the item, and 84% for the Treasures of the Thunder King. So it seems like what they've tried to do here is subtly increase the drop rate and decrease the rate of failbags, so that perhaps people, that sort of perception of always getting failbags decreases a little bit. Now with a 25% drop rate and you're killing 4 bosses, that would mean that on average you would get 1 piece of loot per raid finder. Of course, 4 times 25% does not equal 100%, like that would just be stupid, but it is definitely, it's definitely higher, I suppose. It's nice that actually, I think it's good. Definitely LFR in the Throne of Thunder, I think it had too low of a drop rate, because it didn't really respect people's time. At the end of the day, you could do 3 wings of that and get nothing, and when you're putting your time into a game like that, the game needs to respect your time, and I think this is probably a more fair drop rate. I know it's not a ginormous increase, but when you pair that with the fact that this is only the base item drop rate, that will increase as you get, for your bonus coins, that increases. So between the bonus coins and the base drop rate being a little bit higher, I think, things should be pretty good. Now next up for Flex, it's 25% in the Siege of Orgrimmar and then 75% for the failbags. So it's pretty much the exact same. I don't know, what do you think of this? I think it's a pretty good change actually, upping those subtly by 10%. Hopefully we'll just get to the point where people will be able to solidly get 1 piece of gear on average per run of the LFR. And I think that's also especially fair in Siege of Orgrimmar, since 1 wing is 4 bosses and it does take a little bit longer. Okay, it may depend on, say, the amount of trash between one boss and another, but yeah, still, might take a little bit longer. So yeah, I think that's pretty damn good actually. Now let's talk about world first progression. So currently Method and Blood Legion are leading the pack on 25 heroic, and they're both 13 out of 14, so currently working on heroic Garrosh. Seems like quite the fight. It's interesting, and some of those later bosses really did keep those guilds back for quite a while. And next up in 10, the 10 heroic scene, Paragon is currently leading, also at 13 out of 14. So it should be pretty interesting. It seems like the 10 progression was a little bit harder near the start, but then they sort of evened up near the end. Paragon, right now they're sort of drawn with Method and Blood Legion, but earlier it did seem like the 10-man guilds were a little bit behind. That said, 25 probably does attract the most hardcore of the hardcore, the ultra hardcore, whatever, so maybe that's the thing. But anyway, now let's talk about something which I thought would be worth mentioning. So I was reading on the forums, and this guy pretty much said that the best way to do things would be to present a challenge and just sort of say, here's dig a hole, here's a spade, go do it. Sort of just give people a challenge, give them the tools to beat it, and let them get better. And what Blizzard said was that that's not true, and that they didn't really want to get into doing some sort of social commentary or anything, but that their method of doing it was that everything, in terms of the way they designed the game, pretty much everything is valid in terms of what people want, and they can't say that they know what people want. That's definitely true, but I think there's a little bit of a problem where a game loses its core identity when you try to cater to absolutely everyone in every single way. And this is more of a philosophy thing, because I think right now they're doing a good job with the different difficulty modes. I think LFR, really, it nearly hurts I think it hurts the game more than it helps it at the minute, because people get burned out. Because even if you enjoy LFR, and I know there are people who enjoy LFR, but you've got to admit that doing, say, Wing 2 of the Siege of Orgrimmar 1 and wiping for 8 times in a boss because 4 people are being silly, and there's nothing you can do to control that because there's you know, it's a random group, no one cares about each other. Like, even the people who enjoy LFR have got to admit that that is not fun, and that it just dilutes the game's experience. I think, sorry, cold. I think there are better ways that they can manage things like that, and yeah, it's weird, the whole sort of getting people better, and Blizzard just offering an easier difficulty level, and I'm all fine for an easier difficulty level. I just think that making like a zergable queue, like queuable version, may not be the best way, or at least just a zergable version, because the thing is, like, you just, with a random queue, there's no real strategy or tactics to go into things. I honestly think that if they do keep on the LFR thing, they need to have a way to train players about the key parts of the fight. So say in Nazgrim, I think the game should definitely tell people not to attack him during defensive stance, because, you know, just stuff like that I think would really bring up the experience for everyone. But yeah, it is interesting, this whole idea of, like, the more that they try to cater everything to everybody, it just kind of dilutes the game. It's interesting. I think mounts actually are a good example of this, flying mounts. I remember back when, say, like Netherwing or something, and if you had a Netherwing Drake, that wasn't raid content, you know, that was solo PvE stuff, but it's still something that not a giant amount of people had, both because of the money for epic flying, and just the fact that it took like a month and a bit. So I think that, like, that was a really nice idea of doing a mount, and it meant that they were rare, they were special. When you saw someone with it, you knew that they put in effort. It wasn't diluted, there was something that was still kind of like raw and full of energy with that. But if you were to, say, transfer that into the current version, which would be the Cloud Serpents, everyone has a Cloud Serpent, really. I mean, it's so easy to get rep with the people, and those mounts don't mean as much as they used to. And I even remember before I had a Nether Drake, I still, like, thought, you know, damn, I'd really like to have one of those. It seems like a lot of work, but I think, you know, it would be like a badge of honor, and I'd really like that. That's the reason I wanted that mount, and not because it's, you know, it's a nice mount and everything, but it's like a symbol of work, you know, something that you can be proud of afterwards. And I think that by just sort of smoothing the road and making some things easy, and a good example of that would be making, say, Order the Cloud Serpent too easy, I think that just sort of dilutes the end reward, which dilutes the game, compromises how good the game is, and sort of jangles up the whole reward structure of a game. You know, it's an MMO, it's just kind of taking you from fix to fix of, you know, oh, I get a gear drop here, and that'll sort of keep me enthused and entertained until I get the next one. That's kind of the way MMOs go. And I think that the more those gear drops, like, don't mean as much, kind of it's worse for the game. But yeah, little incoherent talky thing for you. Yeah, say in the comments, what do you think about, like, all that stuff? And I'll just read out the person's, like, first question. I may as well. He basically said, you don't make people better, you don't make better players by smoothing the road for them, you do it by handling them a shovel and saying, here are the tools, fix it yourself. And Blizzard just said, this is unfortunately common, and if you just try to make things harder, you know, people think that if you just make things harder, people will aspire to greatness, but that doesn't work for everyone. And yeah, while it's certainly true, I think that there's a very fine line to walk. And this isn't me complaining about the game, I just think it's an interesting discussion, I suppose. And it is relevant to Warcraft, of course. Now, next, let's just blast through a few tweets, and then we'll round off the show. So, tweet-wise, they said they are against having all modes share lockouts, as this would take away the flexibility. And I think this is definitely fair enough. At the end of the day, like, I raid normals, but what if I want to hop into LFR and an alt, you know? Like, that's how I learnt tanking in the previous patch. Was, you know, I do my normal raiding on my hunter, and I just hop over to LFR, my warrior. And yes, by the way, I do sometimes do LFR, I know, as crazy as it may sound from what I say. But I don't know, I thought tanking LFR was actually pretty fun. Because, especially like when the other tank would start failing and they weren't doing their taunts or anything, and you had to really play your class to use all your abilities and cooldowns and shit so you could survive, I thought it was pretty fun. Probably, stupid cold. Probably not fun for the right reasons, but hey, it was fun nonetheless. Now next, Ghostcaller said that personally he prefers 25-man, but he thinks that healing is more fun in 10. Now I don't heal, so I can't exactly say what that means, but I'd imagine that in 10, if you're like 2 healing or 3 healing, perhaps just the way that like the workload and coordination is spread out between the healers could make it more fun, perhaps? I don't know, healers, I'm actually kind of curious to know, so do let me know. Anyway, that's it for today's show, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.